My name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm the executive director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship. I also am a professor at Weatherhead, where I teach courses on entrepreneurship. And it is awesome to have you here today and to welcome Nick Neonakis back to campus, although he's sitting in Florida. Nick and I recently got connected, and it's funny, and Daniel Dukoff, our friend and colleague from development, and Matt Geis made the intros. And since we chatted several weeks ago, or maybe a month and a half ago, there's been all this activity as Nick is re-engaged with folks on campus, including with our colleague Todd Schwarzinger, who's on today, and also connecting a few of our summer students working in our remote entrepreneurship program. So Nick, thank you both for joining us today and for your engagement back with the university. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. It's great to be back, and everything runs blue here, so thrilled to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, I will turn it over to Jaya. Jaya is one of our great undergraduate students who's actually doing her remote entrepreneurship project this summer with an alum who is in Hong Kong. So taking advantage of the fact that everything is remote, she's doing some work in the venture capital space. So these sessions are all student moderated, so Jaya will run the show. If you have questions that you want to ask, either if you're on Zoom or you're on Facebook Live, just put a note either in the chat, send a private message to Jaya or me, or just sort of raise your hand and we'll make it very interactive. So with that, Jaya, let me turn it over to you, and thank you for doing this.
Awesome. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Jaya, and I'm a rising junior studying accounting and finance with a minor in dance. I have the pleasure of introducing Nick, who's a Crew alumni and the author of Franchise MBA, as well as the CEO of the franchise consulting company. So he's had various positions throughout his career, and I know he's super excited to share his background with everyone. So Nick, if you want to take it away and just start giving us kind of a background of your education and then going into some of your positions in your career.
Sure. Okay. So grew up in suburban New Jersey, went to undergrad at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Moved back to Greece, where I was born, ran a business on the island of Santorini for a couple of years, then came back, got into finance in New York, and then decided I wanted to get an MBA, and looked at a whole bunch of different schools, and Weatherhead and Case were absolutely at the top. And I think, the thing that for me was so important, I went to tour other schools, and it was sort of like a number, and then I got out to Weatherhead, and the whole family, it just seemed wrapped around me. And so it was such a great experience. Met my wife at Weatherhead in Richard Osborne's class. So Stephanie Zabo Neonakis, class of 2002 as well. So I got an MBA and a wife, which was terrific. Okay. And so out of business school, I was hired by the founders of a company called First Service, which is the largest publicly traded franchisor, property services franchisor in the world. They own Collier's Commercial Realty and California Closets and CertaPro Painters and a whole bunch of different property services brands. And so I spent a decade there, ended up being VP of a bunch of the different companies, running development teams, and got to a place where I was just traveling too much and really, really loved everything that I'd been doing, but wanted to start my own practice. So ended up working with family offices and private equity companies, helping them, high net worth individuals, helping them purchase franchises. Wrote a couple of books along the way. Franchise MBA did really well. And then we started the franchise consulting company a few years back. And what we do here, we've got about 139 offices in the US. We've got offices in Canada, Sweden, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. We just opened one up in Cambodia. And we work with about 350 different franchise brands, everything from ones you've heard of like Supercuts or Great Clips to ones that maybe you haven't heard of, and kind of everything in between. And we help people buy and sell their franchises. We started a couple of other businesses along the way, a franchise trade show called Great American Franchise Expo. and created the world's first virtual reality platform in franchising. So I sent teams of people out all around the country taking pictures of the different brands that we work with, and then bought a container load of VR headsets, and we would ship these out to folks so that they could do virtual tours of businesses. And then that became pretty successful through the trade show, the physical trade show platform. Obviously, that changed a couple of months back with the pandemic. So we ended up turning it into an online trade show that now we do every 2 weeks. And it's become the largest online franchise trade show in the world. It's really pretty cool now how the bounds of physicality have changed, right? We'll have people from all over the world that log in, where then they're doing a Zoom call, kind of like we are right now, but with virtual trade show booths and executives from the franchise companies. We also launched a magazine in January called Franchise Journal that goes out to about 500,000 people all around the world. And we just published our July edition, which is really, really cool and very timely because it's the education edition of all things. So it highlights educational franchises. And we're really fortunate to have the Candy and Ben Carson, who have started the Carson Scholars Foundation 25 years ago. They paid almost 10,000 scholarships out there. So we were really fortunate they were on the front cover, and they have a great story in there. So if you go to franchisejournal.com, you'll be able to see that as well. And like you said, I live in Coral Gables, Florida, south of Miami, with my wife and 3 kids and a dog. And great to be here and see all these happy, smiley faces.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So part of your background, I know based on your LinkedIn profile, you have many different positions in lots of different companies. So like Oakley, Charles Schwab, I think Morgan Stanley you had. Can you kind of explain your roles and how you got there and eventually now are the CEO of your franchise consulting company?
Sure. So there's sort of pre-Weatherhead and post-Weatherhead. Pre-Weatherhead, I had this notion of being in finance and this kind of stuff. And my roles there were pretty standard, traditional, work with clients, talk about investments and so on. Post-Weatherhead, Weatherhead was really a very entrepreneurial experience and, interacting with a really wide range of companies. I think there are certain areas in the country you grow up, you kind of feel like you're going to go in some specific track. And I think the New York tri-state area tends to be finance or law, and San Francisco tends to be high tech and so on. And, for me, Weatherhead was really a great experience and sort of looking at all the other different options that are out there. So when I met the folks who started First Service, which actually was started back in the 70s, it was College Pro Painting was the genesis of that organization, which is now multi-billion-dollar global company. It really gave me an appreciation for what, entrepreneurs could do. And so, that was the beginning of the post-Weatherhead, which has been exclusively franchising now for going on 20 years. And really an amazing journey, I think, through all the different facets of franchising, because it touches on so many different industry categories and so many different people, from somebody who owns a single unit franchise to a franchisor who's looking to go public with their brand and everything in between.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So I know your book and also the company kind of touches on the 4 critical steps to finding the ideal franchise business. If you could kind of touch on that and explain that in a basic and simple way for us to understand who are unfamiliar with the franchise business.
Sure. So I think, it's a lot easier to get into business than to get out of business. So I always caution people, before you go and start something, think carefully about what you're getting into and is it the right thing for you and your family. And I always tell people it's a journey, right? And there are a lot of things that you're going to learn along the way. So I like to use the analogy of walking on rocks on a river. And, if you think of how you'd step on rocks, maybe in some river in Chagrin Falls or, somewhere, go slow, test before you commit to each of those stones, because they tend to be pretty big steps and you don't want to fall off. So do your homework. And I think the first step, the most important step, is you. It's who are you? What are you good at? What are you trying to achieve? Write a business plan on yourself. A lot of times people rush into writing a business plan on a company and putting down numbers around, how much is the plant, property, and equipment going to cost and all this other stuff. But really the reason you're buying a business is to achieve some kind of outcome. So be clear about the outcome that you want for yourself. And that's the business plan that I recommend to people to write. The second step is hold that plan up to all the different options that are out there and find ones that fit the criteria that are important to you. And you've already written them down, so you've written down what you want. And the nice thing with a lot of businesses, franchising certainly, is that you have a lot of case studies out there. So you can go and see the people that own these businesses. What are they doing? How's it working? And go do your homework. Check out the industry. Mystery shop the locations. Mystery shop their competitors. See if they say they make the best hamburger in the world, go eat the hamburger. If you like it, great. If you don't like it so much, well, then it's probably time to move on. Go meet the CEO. Go meet the operations people. I've had clients in the past who called and said, it looks like a great business, but I met the CEO and it's kind of oil and water. And I say, well, why would you get married if it was a bad first date? So go and actively learn about who you're looking to get into business with. That's the second step. The third step is eventually you're going to have one or two ideas that really make a lot of sense. And go and work in one of those businesses. Go and flip the hamburgers. Go and follow an owner around. Go see what you'd be doing if you bought the business. And whether you love it or hate it, either one's okay. But you have to do that before you really commit to the business, before you jump into it. And candidly, if a company won't let you do that, it's kind of like buying a car, but you can't take it for a test drive. I'd really want to know why. The last step is the legal and the financial step. And you want to take your time here, do your homework. How are you going to finance the business? What's your cost of capital look like? Is it the optimal allocation? And then legally, a franchise is a pretty significant investment. And there's a 300-page document that you need to really understand. So hire an attorney, hire a franchise attorney, have them review everything that you're going to be signing. And, if something goes wrong along the way, along those 4 steps, take a few steps back and figure out why it went wrong, but do that before you commit. So sometimes it's an iterative process where you're learning new things about yourself and your requirements in owning a business. And, when you find the right one, take the leap. It's always going to be scary. But, I think as we all know, time is short. And if you don't take risks in life, you're probably not going to hit the outcomes that you want. But just do it smart. So that's what I would recommend to somebody if they're saying, what are the steps I need to think about in owning or buying a business?
Right. Awesome. Thank you. And so also part of the company has the whole concept.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask? I had my hand up there for a little while.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. My bad.
Yeah. Just a quick question. So, as I said, I'm a recovering CEO, but one of the things that I've always thought about was, I've talked to a friend of mine around in the neighborhood, and I live in Kent, Ohio, and we kicked around this idea of, wouldn't it be great to have an IHOP closer to campus? There's no IHOP, so there's, you're not buying it from someone. You're standing it up, and I had no idea what is involved. And you use the term high net worth individual, which I would not qualify myself as. But if you were to just ask, if you were to say, okay, well, here's a place that could use a Mickey D's or an IHOP or something, or a KFC, what kind of money do you have to bring to the table for something like that? Just a straightforward, quick answer, if I can ask.
Yeah, well, it depends on the size of the business, what the build out cost is going to look like. But let's say you're going to put a 5,000 square foot IHOP into a place somewhere near Case. You might have, it's going to depend on the real estate. I would say you're probably somewhere in the $1.2 million to $1.5 million range. So on that, you could probably finance it by putting 20% down, getting an SBA loan. If it's within some sort of special tax zone, there might be some additional things. But I would say in general, you're probably going to put 20% cash down on something like that, finance the rest. There's some pretty favorable terms out there right now. Certainly a pretty straightforward calculation to figure out. We'd be happy to help you with that. If you have an interest in getting some more information, but
so again, you're saying it's like a million to $1 million to 1.5 is kind of what that's sort of what you gotta, you might find, and you're saying you'd come to the table with roughly 20% of that, and the rest you'd finance.
That's right. Again, the delta here is the real estate. What's the cost of the real estate?
Yeah, and I said Kent, not Case, because Case is in Cleveland. And Kent is much cheaper in terms of real estate.
Here's what I would do is the costs for the franchise are straightforward, and every franchise company has to file a franchise disclosure document, which is required by the Federal Trade Commission. There are 23 chapters within that FDD. Item 7, they're called items, like a chapter, an item. Item 7 is the cost breakdown, and they're going to give it to you in ranges based upon the high and the low that the franchisor has seen. Certain costs are going to be fixed, like the franchise fee, for instance, but then they're going to have a range for other things, marketing, staff, etc.
Okay.
Take a look. You can go, Wisconsin has a great website, not to get really super granular, but
I'm all ears.
Go check out the Wisconsin Department of Corporations. They have you have the ability to pull down their just about any FDD of any company that's registered in Wisconsin. California has a site too, but it's more complex than Wisconsin's. Minnesota has a decent site like this. These are really the 3 states that have these sites. And you can get their FDDs, and then you can do your own analysis, put together a pro forma based upon what the fixed costs are in the FDD, and then I would call your local commercial realtor in Kent and say, look, I'm looking to put something like this in. What's it going to cost me to get a XYZ size facility? But the other thing I would recommend if you're thinking of something like this, and again, not to go off on a tangent, is I read a report earlier this morning from the Restaurant News Association. Something like 23,000 restaurants are about to close up.
Yeah,
they're never going to reopen.
So you're better off. That was my other question. You're better off going and buying something
or converting it. Yeah, let's say you will like brand A, but brand B closed down. You could probably go and take that space over and then reflag it, right?
That's what we were talking about.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that we do with clients. We'll take a case study, break it apart, figure out what's the optimal way to go do it. What's the real estate look like? What's the cost of capital, and so on. So there's, the nice thing is all these are finite items, right? They're known. So you just have to go and do a little bit of homework. But the answers are out there.
Yeah. Can I ask one other just quick question? I don't want to dominate the time at all. So regarding that sort of stuff, when you look at franchises, is the owner typically involved in the business day to day or not? I mean, I'm just going to contrast that to, you go around the corner, there's a local restaurant and, a family owned restaurant, and typically the owners are, in the back kitchen or, they're really in the day to day operations. Is that the case with franchises also, or are owners typically one step removed?
Well, like most things in life, the answer is it depends.
Okay.
It depends on the person's capitalization. It depends on, what they're looking to do. There are definitely franchise companies that are owner operated where it might be, a single man in a van or a man in a restaurant. It could also be, 1,500 Wendy's that somebody owns, and, they're probably not making a whole lot of hamburgers, and then everything in between. So it really depends on the scale of the entity or the person who's behind it. So, the nice thing with franchising is that depending on what your platform is that you want to get into it with, is then going to dictate what the scale of the opportunity is going to be. I mean, there are franchises out there that, $75,000, $100,000, and you can, in essence, buy yourself a job, which is what I'm seeing a lot of right now because there's such a high unemployment. And then, there are franchise systems where, you might own 10 IHOPs or 50 IHOPs. It really depends on what you're looking to do.
Great, thank you. So part of the mission of the franchise consulting company is to help those who have made the decision to achieve independence through business ownership and make their own dream. The concept of paying it back while also paying it forward. If you could explain that a little bit and kind of the role of philanthropy within the business.
Sure, yeah. So we actually just announced that we're going to do a $100,000 raise for the Carson Scholars Foundation. The FCC is going to match dollar for dollar, first $50,000 that's donated from our group. So, I think there are a lot of different ways that you can give back. One of the things that we're really passionate about is people taking control of their independence and really making their own destiny. So within the FCC, we have so many amazing people from every race, color, creed, orientation. But what I saw a few years ago is that by and large, these communities weren't really represented in franchising, at least on the leadership side. So we created a series of councils that we rolled out. There's the African American Franchise Council, which was the first and only African American group dedicated to helping expand upon business ownership. It's led by a great guy named Abel Bayena and Brian Pearson, Janine Kempfer, Richard Nichter. Then we set up the India Franchise Council, which is led by a Weatherhead alum, Kapil Manocha. Faizun Kamal. We started the Islamic American Franchise Association, which is Casey Kassem and Sam Veale. We started the Veterans Franchise Council to help veterans learn about business ownership. The First Responders Franchise Council to help firefighters, police, and EMTs. The Diversity Fran Project, which was for the LGBTQ community. And, if you think about business ownership, it cuts across whatever group you're from. Everybody wants the same thing, which is you want a good life. You want security in your future for you and your family. And so I think business ownership really is the American dream. And, our goal is to help educate people to figure out for themselves, is that the right part of their American dream? And so, as we continue to grow domestically and internationally, we'll continue to put resources into every community out there, because I think anybody that wants to grow, that wants to provide services to, their community has the ability to succeed in this country. And I'm really proud to be a part of the FCC, because all of us are really pushing in that same direction.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so do different individuals or high net worth individuals, are they coming to you and the company, or is it kind of like you're reaching out to them to make their dreams a reality?
Yeah, I'd say both. With 139 offices all across the country, the amount of exposure that I think we get and generate is pretty significant. So, whether it's social media, or trade shows, seminars, the Chamber of Commerce, BNI, local marketing, affiliate groups, our people are pretty active in all the communities talking about what business ownership looks like. So, people reach out to us. A lot of times we'll reach out to them, based on something that they might have posted. Say, hey, if you have an interest, we'd love to help you.
Right. Yeah. Because I know it's hard if you don't have the resources to discover the FCC or any other programs that can help make those dreams a reality. So it's great that you guys are also doing your part and kind of meeting them halfway there and reaching out as well. Yeah, definitely. So also, what would you say is the most challenging part or aspect of your position, and how have you dealt with that?
I think, probably like most people, the larger your organization gets, you still have 24 hours in a day, right? So how do you allocate time? How do you make time for people that you care about? I'm fortunate to have a great team of people, but I think probably the biggest challenge, which isn't really unique to me, it's how do you structure your time so that it's effective? If somebody wants to have a conversation, they need to have a conversation. It's an important conversation to them. You have to have that conversation with them, and what are the important conversations and what aren't. And I think in this post-pandemic world of Zoom calls and scheduled meetings, and I'm sure everybody probably feels like they've been on more Zoom calls and more scheduled meetings in the past 90 days than I've seen a lot of heads nodding that they've been in, the past 9 years before that. I think it's how do you budget your time in order to really have the maximum impact that you want to have. Everything else is really pretty simple. When you think about it, it's a project. They're knowns, they're unknowns. You kind of get through them. You figure it out. Are there really any problems in life that are insurmountable? I just don't think there are. Either you'll figure it out or you won't. If you can't, well, then it means that it wasn't meant to be figured out. Move on and go on to the next issue.
Yeah,
like
that's a good way to think about it. And so as far as the pandemic affecting your company, you mentioned the online franchise trading show. If you could kind of explain that a little bit more, so we can wrap our heads around that and kind of what goes down in these online shows and how you're making these deals and transactions happen.
Sure. So, it's interesting. Franchising tends to be counter-cyclical. So as unemployment goes up, franchise ownership tends to go up as well. And I think it's a very interesting time right now in that we have mass unemployment, but whether the stock market's completely disassociated from reality, I don't know. But it's still pretty high. So you have an economy that in certain aspects is doing well. You have a population that there's maybe the highest unemployment ever. And so you have a lot of people who are in that sort of 40 to 50, 55-year-old range who are thinking, I'm probably not going to get another job. I'm too young to start something fresh, get some entry-level job. I've got all these smart kids from Case graduating, and they're taking up all the entry-level jobs. And I'm probably too young to retire. So there's this interesting component within the market. And so a lot of those folks who, they lived through the last recession, they lived through the dot-com boom and all the other stuff that's gone on, are thinking, I think it's probably time for me to control my own destiny. And so what I've seen is a huge uptick in the interest in franchising. We've actually done a lot more deals this year than we did year to date last year. It was a great year last year. And so I think the high unemployment is going to be actually a big renaissance in business ownership across the United States. My belief, and from what I'm seeing from the data that I see, is that more and more people are interested in entrepreneurship. And I think that's a net positive for the country. Because when you have people thinking entrepreneurially, they start finding areas that they can create solutions for. They start hiring, they start paying taxes, they start doing all the amazing things that makes our country great, and they start doing it en masse. So even though certainly the pandemic has been horrible and a health crisis, and it, obviously it sucks not being able to travel around the country or go out on a date to dinner with your husband or wife, I think that the silver lining in all of this is going to be this amazing flowering of entrepreneurship, not only in our country, but also everywhere else. So the other question that you asked about the trade shows, the way the trade shows work is, if you think of a physical trade show, we used to go, to a city, and we would rent out a big convention center like the IX Center, and then we would, hire a union to come and put down carpet and put up, booths and all this other stuff, and then we'd ship all kinds of things there, and we'd do all kinds of marketing, and then people would come in and walk around and talk to people. And well, they don't want to do that so much anymore. And so the online shows actually came from our very last show was Tampa, Florida, March 13th. You guys remember March 13th? That was the day the pandemic was declared. And so we were driving up to Tampa, and this convoy of trucks and stuff getting lugged up, and all of a sudden my phone started ringing off the hook, and so did Abel Bayena, who runs the trade show business for us. And it was exhibitors saying, hey, I'm not coming to the show. A pandemic was just declared, and I don't think I want to fly. And so about half the show dropped out. From the time we got from Miami to Tampa, it was like half a show. And so we thought, well, if the exhibitors aren't coming, and maybe the only ones that were there were the ones that had flown down, a day or two before to go get some sun in the, fun in the sun, is we're probably not going to have a whole lot of people coming to this either. So we'd already rented out the Tampa Convention Center, and we called the mayor and said, is this still on? Are you closing up the convention center? And they said, no, it's still on. I don't know if they wanted to refund us the money or something, but so it was on. And so we went to the show, it got set up, and I thought, let's turn this thing into a food drive. And so we reached out to Feeding America, and a great group of people there. We turned the show into a food drive, and we ended up collecting tons of food from the show that then we donated to their affiliate, Feeding Tampa Bay. But on the way back from that show, we made the decision to turn it into an online show. And I'm glad we did, because we were significantly ahead of the curve on that. And so now, people come to our shows. The next one is next Thursday from 11 to 5. Go to franexpousa.com if you want a free ticket. And you go into what looks like a virtual trade show, and there are brands and booths, and there's, somebody will pop up with a video chat if, you're looking at the Meineke booth or something. And, there'll be an executive from Meineke there who can interact with you one-on-one, just like if you went to a physical show. But you can do it from the safety and comfort of your own home. So I think there are going to be a lot of things like that, where people take the current situation and then they think about, how can we achieve the same result, but under the circumstances that we have. And I think, as human beings, we're all pretty resourceful and resilient, and we'll figure it out, as we always have.
Definitely. And I think Michael also had a question. If you want to.
No, thank you. Thanks, Jaya. So Nick, both you actually and Bill, when we were starting up, we're talking about the impact of Richard Osborne on when you were Weatherhead students. And Richard, and we all miss him and the presence that he had at our school and in the community. And I think his take on entrepreneurship, and particularly focusing on, and there's a whole community of folks that have taken his courses that he's encouraged to look at buying businesses. And obviously franchising is a different way to get involved with the existing businesses. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Richard's influence on you when you were a student, and the sort of community of people that have taken his classes, and kind of the legacy that he's left on you, and maybe, others as you've been in touch with folks that have taken classes from Richard.
Sure. Yeah. Well, he, that guy had such a presence. You knew when he was in a room with his, double-breasted blazer and his, aviator glasses, and talking about his wife, the Beamer, and, such a great guy. And I always loved watching how he interacted with the guests. And for me, that was such an informative part of being in that class, of how does a really high-level guy interact with other people like that. I think that was maybe one of the biggest things that I took out of that class, was watching how he kept the class flowing, and the questions that he asked, and how he made everybody feel so welcome, and his gracious manner, and just what a amazingly class act of a guy. You're not going to meet somebody like that very often in life. So I think anybody who had an opportunity to be in his class was fortunate to be able to watch the accumulated lessons of a decades spent in business. So I think for me, some of the lessons that I learned from Gorilla above that is having a structured process for taking a look at a business and thinking about what are the various components, and then what's the interplay between those. So what's the operations, the finance, the marketing, the HR, right? All of these components of a business, you have to kind of break them apart and then think about them on their own merits. And then as a leader, you have to think about how they all interplay together. And so I think he did that masterfully. I think he did it intuitively, from the years and years that he spent doing it. And I think he really has taught generations of business leaders that came out of Weatherhead something that, hopefully they'll continue to propagate. So I think his legacy, it's, like this orchard, of trees that continue to bear their own seeds and keep going out. So I think the memory, the legacy of Richard Osborne is vast. I think it spreads all around the globe, and I think it started at Weatherhead. And hey, I met my wife in his class, so it was, for me, it was a pretty worthwhile class. I took all of his classes, and I remember he came to me. He said, "Why are you taking all of my classes?" And I said, "Because I like you. I want to sit in your classes." And he said, "I'm kind of teaching the same stuff in all of them. You know that, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I get it. I just like watching you move around, man."
That's great. He is missed. He is missed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I never had the opportunity to take class from Richard, but he seems like a great guy, and I would have loved to take class from him. But what would you say is kind of the most important message that he said to his students and that you got out of him in entrepreneurship in general?
The way he started off every class: let the journey begin.
There you go. Awesome.
Let the journey begin.
I've got a couple questions for you, if I could, Nick, again. The first thing is, where are you from in Jersey? Yeah, I'm a Jersey boy too, so.
Summit, Union County, 142B off the turnpike. How about you?
Yeah, I'm Morris County. I was from Morris County.
Yeah, not too far.
60s and 70s. So anyway, yeah. So what was interesting to hear you, I'm just getting down to nuts and bolts, is that when you described the demographic, you nailed it. I'd say it's 40 to 60, maybe 45 to 60 age range. Stuff happens, too young to retire, not high net worth, but have some change that and I think that is the ideal demographic that you just aim for, because it's you nailed it. That's what started my conversations of guys that I talk to. Same thing. So just wanted to say that.
Right on. And there's a distribution. It's fascinating. You have people who are in their early 20s that maybe they graduated college, but they're not really that happy with what's out there, and their parents maybe aren't that happy that they're still living at home. So like, how about I buy you a business?
Right.
Get on out of here. All the way to people who've retired that they just don't want to turn it off, and they want to continue to be active and
they actually want and need to be. I mean, because there's no beach money sitting around, but they're reasonably comfortable, So I think the thing that needs to happen, though, to be very honest, and I started with the question about, a very, straightforward answer around what does it take financially, because the average Joe driving down the street, that sees the empty building and says, wouldn't it be cool if there was a, name your franchise there? And I'm thinking about more restaurants. Then they just go into the mind block mode, because they just there's no knowledge out there as to what does it take? What does it take? I mean, are all the guys that are all the people that have franchises multimillionaires, or are they regular guys? And that's the part that needs to be cleared up, because it's not right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are over 4,000 different franchise brands operating in the United States. And most people think of restaurants when they think of franchising, because that's what you drive past all the time: McDonald's, Wendy's, etc. But the reality is, franchising is a marketing model that businesses use to grow. So across every industry category, you're going to find franchises. And there's so many different modes of ownership that you can really tailor what's out there according to what you're looking to achieve or what your talents, skill sets, and resources are. You know, somebody that has $50,000 to invest, they probably shouldn't be looking at an IHOP. They're not going to be able to afford it. But they might be able to do something where they start a painting franchise or an elder care franchise or all kinds of other B2C type businesses that then over time you can grow them. So I always tell people you have to think of this balancing board that you're on. And one side is time and the other is money. So your balance is, what do you have more of? If you have more time and less money, then you're going to be more of the driver of the business. You'll be the employee. Maybe you're the only employee. If you have more money, then you're going to need to hire people because you have less time. And so you're going to substitute dollars for time. But the way that you interact on that balancing board is very unique. The way you're going to do it, Al, is going to be different than maybe the way Mike does it, or that Bill does it, or that Daniel does it, or that I do it. So you have to think about your own balancing board and then make sure that the companies that you're looking at reward that mix of time and money. And the people that are in those companies that own them are hitting the kinds of outcomes that you're looking to hit. And, there's going to be a distribution there as well. What you don't want to do is say, I need to make X. And the only people in that franchise that are making X are like the top 2%. Because now you're trying to pattern your behavior on a very small sample set, right? So you probably want to take a look at what's the median look like. If the median of the franchise ownership demographic is hitting an outcome that you say, hey, that's I could be okay with that, then that's probably a pretty good place to be, And I know everybody thinks their kid is the smartest and the best one in the room. But, I always think kind of take a look at what the averages are. And if the averages work for you, you're probably in the right place. If you're taking a very small group of people and you're saying, boy, I got to really hit it out of the ballpark in order to pay my light bills, that's probably too much of a risk to take.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Thank
really
you, Nick. Interesting.
Yeah.
Good.
We have a question from Bill Snow. He says, aside from access to capital, what do potential franchises lack that keep them from getting a franchise? You can.
What franchisees lack from, I think fear is probably the biggest thing, whether people have capital or not. If you grew up in a business owning family, you have a much higher likelihood of then owning a business. If you grew up, as the daughter or son of an entrepreneur, most people didn't. And so I think there are a lot of people who dream about business ownership, but then that last mile is very challenging. So if their financial resources are there, then really that's going to be the main holdback, is that they just haven't done it and they're scared. There's a fear overhang. So, my advice is, if you're feeling that, and it might be a self-preservation instinct, right? Fear is a response from thousands of generations of something keeping you alive. So it might be that your gut's telling you don't do it for a really good reason. That's why I recommend to people, go take it for a test drive before you buy it, and make sure that you can do it. And if they won't let you do that, why? Why won't someone let you do that? But you can address fear through knowledge, right? It's like diving off the high board. Well, first time it's kind of scary, but if you know that the water is 20 feet deep, not 3 feet deep, you probably feel like you have a little margin of safety. But if you don't know how deep the water is, that's a pretty scary thing to do. So my advice would be climb off the high board and then, wade into the water and figure out, oh, geez, it's only 3 feet deep here. I don't think I want to jump off that high board.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we are running out of time, but as a last question, if you had one piece of advice to give to students or potential entrepreneurs, what would that be?
just do it.
Just
You know,
do it.
if you have it within you, if you're thinking about doing something and you're kind of scared, go do your homework, figure it out. But there's always, I mean, I've had a couple of different instances in my life where, you know, I left a great job at First Service. I was an officer of the company, a VP, made tons of money, but there was something missing for me, and it was to do my own thing. And then, you know, when we started the trade show business and the magazine and, you know, all these things that cost money to do, there's always this, well, what happens if it doesn't work out? Am I about to just, you know, throw a bunch of money out the window? And I think if you do your homework, you'll have that fear. If you feel the conviction of the work that you've done, you'll always regret the risk that you don't take. And I think there's one thing that, you know, this pandemic, I think has taught a lot of people is you can go through life pretty fast, but it would be pretty bad if, you know, knock on wood, you're sitting in your hospital bed attached to a bunch of tubes and you're thinking about all of the things that you could have done, but you didn't. So my advice is you live once, go figure it out. If you want to do it, go do it. Go take the risk, swing for the fences, work your ass off. And here was another thing that Gorilla said. And if you ever took his class, you'll remember this as the very last thing that he said to you on the last day of school. Don't take any shit from anybody. You guys remember that? That was a Gorillaism. So I apologize if I just blew up the webinar, but go do it. Go do it. You won't regret it. That's my advice.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. It's been a pleasure to have you. And we'll take it back to Michael.
Great. Thanks, Jaya. Nick, I'm going to do a couple of announcements at the very end, but let me, on behalf of the Veale Institute and Weatherhead, thank you for doing this today. It's great. I think, franchising as an entrepreneurial topic is one that we haven't covered in our speaker series, and, you know, the richness of your experience and actually some of the Weatherhead and Case alums that you involved. And it was great having you on today, someone sort of working in the field. So we look forward to continuing to sort of mine this topic. And I know, as we set off at the top, you've been engaging with our colleague Todd Schwarzinger and others on campus. So we really appreciate you sort of welcoming you back into the Weatherhead fold and finding ways to work together. So thank you for what you're doing for us in a variety of ways and for taking the time today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's an honor, and I sure do appreciate being able to spend some time with you.
Awesome. Just a couple of quick announcements for those who are on. So next week, we're actually launching a new sort of program theme we're calling the Veale Skills Lab. So we have a number of people, including Jaya, that are working in these remote internships this summer. So we're going to do 2 sessions next week, kind of on skill building. The first one, and I think these would be interesting to the broader community. We have one, so we have Lauren Devaney from LinkedIn, who's actually a Western Reserve Academy alum, not Case Western Reserve alum, who works at LinkedIn, is going to do something on how to rock your LinkedIn profile. So that'll be on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And then on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, my colleague Karen Oy, who works at our Kelvin Smith Library, is going to do something on sort of research skills and finding business resources through the library. So that'll be on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we'll be back to sort of our more typical speaker series format. Joe Keithley, who is a former trustee of the university, former president and CEO of Keithley Instruments, is going to be in conversation with us, and that'll be on Thursday at 1 o'clock. So a couple things upcoming. And again, thanks everybody for joining, and have a great July 4th long weekend, everybody.